Imagine seeing with your own eyes the moment someone's life, innocent and desperate, is consumed by something that shouldn't exist in this world. What would happen if your daughter's voice was no longer her own, but rather that of a creature screaming blasphemies in strange tongues, twisting its body inhumanly? This is the horror few have been able to witness, experiencing what truly happens when a dark force manifests itself brutally, far from the eyes of the world, in places where hope seems to have been abandoned. The struggle is real, and the scars left are eternal. It's a shock to see faith tested in such a visceral way. On a cold, moonlit dawn, in a forgotten village in the middle of nowhere, Father Miguel felt a strange chill. It wasn't the wind that whistled, but something deeper, something that turned his stomach. He was there for a simple retreat, but what he found was a village shrouded in a heavy, almost oppressive silence, where the residents' gazes betrayed an ancient fear, a terrible secret. Soon whispers began to echo through the dirt streets, telling stories of strange happenings, of things moving in the shadows, of animals going mad, and most disturbing of all, of people changing, becoming grotesque versions of themselves, with voices that seemed to come from distant tombs. The air grew heavy, charged with a cold energy, and Father Miguel knew that the peace he sought for the retreat had been replaced by a mission he never imagined undertaking. With each step through the village, the feeling that something very wrong was happening intensified, making the atmosphere unbearable for anyone who dared stay too long. It was on a rainy night, as lightning streaked the sky, that the true horror revealed itself. A piercing, inhuman scream erupted from the shack of a humble family, a sound that made Father Miguel's few remaining hairs stand on end. He ran toward it, guided by the dim light of the lanterns and the terrified whispers. What he saw was hair-raising. A young woman, known for her sweetness, writhed on the bed, her eyes rolled back and her mouth foaming. Her legs buckled in impossible ways, and an invisible force pulled her upward, as if the claws of a monster were carrying her through the air. From her throat emerged a deep, cavernous voice, not her own, but mocking the crucifix in the priest's hands and uttering frightening threats against the residents present. Fear turned to collective despair. Father Miguel, experienced in theology and preaching, had never witnessed something so powerful and so blatantly evil up close. He knew he was facing complete possession, something beyond any natural explanation, and that faith and courage would be his only weapons against the unknown. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Father Miguel knew he would need more than simple prayers to confront this entity. He spent days and nights fasting and praying, immersed in ancient rituals and religious texts that dealt with confrontations with the inexplicable. The few villagers who still held out hope helped him gather the necessary sacred objects: holy water, a sturdy crucifix, and a scapular of Our Lady, all blessed with unshakable faith. As he prepared, the manifestations intensified. Strange noises in the night, malicious whispers coming from nowhere, and the constant torment of the young woman, whose eyes now radiated a palpable evil. The tension in the village was unbearable. Children cried, adults slept, and the feeling that evil was spreading was constant. Father Miguel, exhausted but determined, felt the weight of all those souls on his shoulders. He knew he could not fail. It was a battle that needed to be fought in secret, far from modernity, in the heart of that darkness forgotten by all. The exorcism began on a foggy morning inside the small stone church, isolated in the village. At the sound of the first Latin words recited by Father Miguel, the possessed young woman, bound for her own safety, began to struggle with terrifying force. Objects fell and flew around, and an unexplained icy breeze blew through the room, even with the doors and windows closed. The guttural voice coming from the young woman insulted, mocked, and tried to reach the priest, revealing details of her past that only he could know, seeking to destabilize him and plant doubt in his mind. It was an ancient and brutal tactic, a mental trap aimed at destroying the priest's faith. He felt the entity's pressure on his mind, almost overwhelming, but he remained steadfast, clutching the crucifix and pouring holy water over the young woman, while the evil voice grew in intensity and horror, mixing sinister laughter with howls of pain and hatred. It was a true struggle, not just physical, but spiritual, for control of the soul. The demonstration's climax reached a terrifying peak when, amid deafening screams and howls, the entity within the young woman began to reveal even darker secrets about the village itself. The blasphemous voice accused some residents of hidden sins, bringing to light guilt and remorse that had plagued the community for decades. The terrified bystanders were unsure whether to believe these accounts coming from something so demonic. One by one, the names emerged, and the revelation of small injustices and forgotten grudges created a palpable tension, dividing hope and instilling fear. The entity seemed to feed on discord, using human secrets as fuel for its continued existence. The priest felt a greater weight, the truth mingling with the darkness, making the confrontation even more complex and dangerous, for the evil had found a way to exploit the community's internal fissures, transforming them into its own strength. The hours dragged by in an exhausting battle. Father Miguel felt his strength fading, his voice hoarse and his body aching, but the young woman still writhed, though less violently. Evil was stubborn, clinging to its prey. The priest's prayers were now a hoarse whisper, but each word carried the fullness of his unshakable faith. He repeated the sacred words tirelessly, knowing this was his only chance of success. It was then that, in a final effort, he raised the crucifix, tears in his eyes and the certainty that goodness, in the end, always triumphs over evil. The scream the young woman let out in that final moment was not of evil, but of agony, a terrible pain that echoed through the church, something that seemed to shatter barriers, accompanied by an absolute silence that, in itself, was an immense relief. Evil seemed to have given way, not through brute force, but through the persistence of faith. As the young woman collapsed, exhausted, in the arms of her family, the voice was hers again, weak but real. Her eyes, though swollen and red, no longer held the cold gleam of evil, but rather those of someone awakening from a prolonged nightmare. The exhaustion was visible in her, and the villagers, now crying with relief, felt the peace they hadn't seen in so long slowly return to the village. The air seemed to lighten, the darkness lessened, and the feeling of oppression finally vanished. Father Miguel, almost exhausted, knelt and gave thanks. The young woman was free, but the scars of the confrontation would remain forever. The frightening memories, the reverent fear for faith, and the certainty that an invisible plan of forces was at work. The villagers would never forget the horror they witnessed, but they would also never forget the priest who bravely opposed it, proving that faith is, indeed, the most powerful of weapons. This shocking story you just witnessed isn't so far from your own life. The trials Father Miguel and the young woman faced remind us that the battle between good and evil isn't limited to remote villages. It happens daily, within us and all around us. It's like an inner voice that tempts us to selfishness or challenges us to forgive. Maintaining faith in our daily lives is our armor against envy, anger, procrastination, and everything that keeps us from our best selves. Practicing forgiveness frees the spirit. Seeking inner peace is the calm we need amidst life's chaos. We need to hear more sermons that nourish the soul and help us have more compassion and charity for one another, because every act of love, every sincere conversation that brings us closer to our fellow human beings, is a form of conversion. And once again, if you have someone special in mind, leave their name in the comments so we can include them in our main prayer with the rosary. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this impactful topic. Have you ever experienced something similar that has shaken your faith? What do you think about the idea that there are forces beyond our comprehension at work in the world? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. It's crucial for us to create this community of faith and reflection here on the channel. And to make sure you don't miss the shocking and revealing videos that will be posted weekly, do yourself and us a favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. That way, you won't miss a thing. I'm counting on you, and until the next video.